relationship, you know when things change. You know when that person is not there with you. It's almost impossible to be in an intimate relationship with someone, and not only, as I said, of the romantic nature. You know, my parents as well can sense if something is up. You know, I can tell if something is bothering my sister that she's not sharing with me. And similarly, you feel the difference. It's hard to explain, but I think it's largely because we are part of the animal kingdom, and sometimes we forget that. We're socialized out of our instinct, but it exists.
Yeah.
So if you're in tune sufficiently with yourself, I think you intuitively can sense those things. And there was not a time during my pregnancy that my son's father was not there. For example, once I was in Atlanta with him, physically, not a time.
Yeah. But
he just was not there.
Right. you know the fact that he was there
physically. You know the
difference.
And why? Because we didn't start there, you know.
Yeah, precisely. That's what
no relationship starts there.
Yeah.
And this is a guy who was very attentive, very kind, who just was exceptionally indifferent, caught up in his own battle and own world at that time.
And you could understand, you're getting progressively more pregnant, and you could understand that and sort of give him the benefit of the doubt. That's hard for an ordinary person to come to terms with.
Not at all, I think. Not if you're honest with yourself. Most times we are not. So, and particularly because we are socialized to believe that it must be this way, so you'll make it work. If it's not working, it's not. There's only so much that that's why it's called a relationship, you know. Yes. Two people have to be in it,
but
otherwise it's not.
And a lot of people use pregnancy. There are some people who say that pregnancy brings out the worst in people, and this is a case here where you could have been, your worst possible self wanting, but you
working it to my advantage.
Yeah, and But you say here, you're telling Ailan this here, this is not the time to be needy. Your father is living a most ugly nightmare in what has been a very stable and charmed life to this point. You know, and I'm saying you seem to be making excuses again for him.
No, I'm just acknowledging what the situation is at that time. It's not an excuse. It was and is emphatically the reality of my life, my son's life, and his father's life at that time. So it's not making an excuse. It's recognizing this is what it is. It didn't stop me from having a great pregnancy. And he did
it seems so, because you keep, and my question is,
it stopped. I do, like all other women, I want the ideal.
Yeah.
And I'm very clear that I will not compromise that. I want the ideal, but I'm not going to attempt to force the ideal into a situation that does not exist. I'm not going to fool myself into thinking that a situation is ideal when it is not. So again, I will add a little tequila to my lemons and mix myself a margarita and move on.
All right. And then how...
so that's what that is. It's not me not taking care of Wendy's needs. I took care of my needs very much during my pregnancy, and I drew strength from my family, from my friends like Bear and Dick and Barbara and Anthony, and from my child. And I had an amazing pregnancy. The most difficult thing about my pregnancy wasn't the boo-ha here, was my relationship with my son's father, which is what I think I explained there very clearly.
Yeah.
But it didn't prevent me from enjoying that time in my life.
What is it about you then that you could separate these things such that you don't let it affect your mood because you don't want it to affect your unborn child? What is it about you that gives you the ability to do that?
I think my upbringing. I'm very much like my dad, and he's that kind of guy too, to a large extent. But actually, there's a lot of both of my parents in me. But my mom is also a glass is half full kind of person. Both my parents are, you know, and I think I'm their kid, so obviously some of that would rub off. And additionally, I'm very sure of who I am. I am an amazing woman, you know?
Yes.
So while I appreciate the difficulties anyone interfacing with me may have. And I know I'm amazing because I also know my weaknesses. I also know my when I've had enough, I know when to pull away, etc. That groundedness, I hope, facilitates me being able to separate
Okay, I'm glad
ugly that is really meant to be directed at me, as opposed to ugly that someone may not have the same emotional control or sense of self that I have in dealing with a situation.
Later on in the book, you talk about wanting to not judge him on the basis of his weaknesses, and you hope that he does the same with you. And I mean to ask, but what are your weaknesses as you see them?
You didn't see, but you read all about them?
At that point, I was writing.
I can be somewhat impatient, very harsh, and not terribly forgiving once you've crossed me enough. Once I am fed up and turned off, then it's almost impossible to come back.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Which is not a good thing.
Yeah.
No one should be that rigid and harsh. And I think that's a weakness, because I am not perfect, and I should be, by extension, a little more forgiving when others are not or are imperfect in their interactions.
But from a lot of the conversation here, it seems as though it takes a lot to get you there. So you don't get there easily. So
I don't, but when I do, I'm done.
I like the part here where you talk about the moonlight in the room. So you're back at these places after one of these late nights, and you say, you describe it as God's warmth, his embrace. And I'm asking, but do you not think that perhaps God is telling you you may have made the wrong choice to have this child out of wedlock, and some of what you may be going through is the result of that?
No, because there are so many persons who have kids in wedlock, and the result is the same. The effect is the same. Not that I have anything against marriage. I like marriage a lot. I want to be married, but I'm not getting married to. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If you think about it, and I hope I don't get in trouble for this, but it's the truth. I'm very Roman Catholic. I love my faith, but Jesus, to a large extent, was conceived out of wedlock, even though it's an immaculate conception. You know what I mean? So
I'm scared to answer, but go ahead.
and I don't think that the God that I have learned so much about in my Catholic upbringing is as unforgiving and as cold and mean as I can be, and sometimes not only my faith but all faiths would like us to believe he is. I think he's a guy for sure. Yes. Or he leans, that supreme being leans more towards guy than girl. But and I relate to him as such. You know, I chat with him sometimes, like you know, but I don't think he's nearly as unforgiving as we would as sometimes we present him to be. And so, you know, there's a passage in the Bible which talks about the footsteps in the sand. Yeah. And at one point, when I'm in my greatest difficulty, God, you know, why did you forsake me? Only one set of footprints. And he says, that's when I was carrying you.
Yes. Yeah,
well, that's, and you know, that's him carrying me, giving me the ability to appreciate that beautiful moon, you know, that evening in New York City, which is one of the hardest places to appreciate both the sun and the moon. Yeah. You know, he managed to light that room like you can't imagine, give me a good little hug when I needed it most.
Yeah, you talk a lot about New York City, about its energy and how it embraces you if you're not intimidated by it, but it rejects you if you get intimidated. And
yes,
a lot of stuff in here, but we have a couple of minutes, just a couple of minutes, yes, and I want to ask you about how are you talk about, you know, David's weaknesses and his mood and that emotional roller coaster that he put you on, and you talk about how he has a disrespect for women except for his mother and his sister, and I'm asking how you guarantee that his son, your son, will not be like that?
Because, well, firstly, I can't guarantee it.
And you fear that he might be?
No. And why? because I am confident that the example we will both give him, and where we fall short, as I said in the book, my friends, my family will give my son, will ensure that Ailan is a healthy, well-adjusted young man who appreciates and respects women. That's why I wrote that book. Even if I did not publish that book, Andy, I would have shared that with my son, because he would want to know his history, as all kids do. You know, in my own experience, there were certain things that my parents did which I questioned, and they, God bless them, didn't know how to explain to my sister and I, so we took it as their rejection of us, when in truth and in fact it was not. It was just them dealing with their own issues, and to some extent neglecting the needs of their kids, as all parents do. So Ailan needs to understand that he is not perfect, he will fall short. He's both his parents by genetics. He'll get the good and the not so good, and I hope that by our example, he will one-up us in terms of the kind of human being that he is.
And just before he's born, you're having this conversation again with him, and you're telling him that all of who you are, who you turn out to be, will be largely as a result of me.
Yes, that's right. As it is with most mothers, most West Indian mothers particularly. And we owe it to our kids to give them the best example we can as well. We still think that once a child doing good in school, everything is okay. And that's not so. We're all doing well in school. Tertiary education is free here. You know, it's time for us to focus on ourselves. We beat up on our poor West Indian men non-stop. We call our Trini men Trinidadians, but we are raising them as such, and it's by our example. The things that many of my girlfriends and many of my mother's friends would never allow their daughters to do and get away with in their homes, they encourage their sons to do it. That's not acceptable. I will not do that with my child. My child, if he, God forbid, becomes a monster, will learn how to be a monster everywhere else, but
not
at home, not around me.
All right, it seems as though we've just begun, but we have to leave it there. Time is up, Wendy Fitzwilliam. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me, Andy.
Once again, Letters to Ailan. If you haven't read it, you should check it out. A book by Wendy Fitzwilliam, the diary she was writing to her son while she was carrying him. Thanks for watching.